Hey there, guys. It's TC Made with TC Gaming. Welcome back. We are in episode 3 of our UE5 RPG mini series. And in the previous series, we brought in our Greystone character for Paragon. And we're trying to do this all with free assets to just talk about general concepts and things so that you guys have some stuff to get you a foundation to build on. So, talking about our character, from an RPG perspective, RPGs have things that are called statistics or attributes, where you can keep track of values on the character. If you level up, you might have things called non-weapon proficiencies if you're an old D&D player like I was. But what we can do is we can take a look at our Greystone player character blueprint here again, and we can pull this up. And what some people would do to build these, myself included, depending on what I'm trying to build, we might go in here and put in another variable in. We might go in and put a variable called like health or hit points or whatever value you want to call that. I would recommend picking a system and then kind of sticking with that system for a while. So if that system's D20 or Unreal Engine, or I mean not Unreal Engine, but Dungeons and Dragons type thing, D20, Roll20, whatever they call it now. That way you have kind of a guide to follow, and then you can always deviate from that down the road. But as we talked before, variables are places to hold stats. So what a variable could be for in here, or not stats but values either. But if I go in here and I put in a variable, I might call this health. And then the way that these things would work, I could go in here and put this into a value. Health could be anything that drains or rises. So we would probably want to make this a float so that it has numbers between 0 and 1 and numbers between 1 and 2. It's not a whole number. It could be an integer, or not an integer, but a float value, which will allow you to have more variance to it. And the way that things work in here, if you're not familiar with variables, what we could do is you could actually pull this out to the world and say get health. And then from here, you could drag out and you could say like, print string or whatever and get the current value of health. And then this just has to be driven by some kind of a node. So, or by another node like a key press or whatever. So let's say that I wanted to go out here and say keyboard J. And I'll just hit the J key, and whenever I hit the J key, it's going to print the string of whatever. Oh, it came in there to the wrong spot. That'd be in here into the in string, so we can just move that out. So what it'll do is when I hit the J key, it'll print the value of health. So let's just go look at what that did. So I got here, and I'm out in the world, and I press J, and what you'll see is in the upper left-hand corner of my screen, you're going to see 0.0 on my screen there. Okay. So now, if we had another mechanism to set the health of our character, this just prints it and tells us what the value of it is. What we could do over here is we could have another node, node. So we'll do a keyboard. And we'll hit the keyboard I key, I guess. So we'll go I. And what we want to do here now is we could pull out health and say set health. And by doing that there, we can set our health to a value. And one way to do this would be to actually set health to whatever the current value of health is plus another number. So we have a float on here. So let's say float and then plus and then float. Actually, I think you can do it with float plus float. No. Let's do plus plus. It gives you incremental float there too. And so it takes a float in and adds some other number to it. So we would go over here and say get whatever our current health is, plug that in here, and then we could add a value. This adds 1 to the specified value. And then so we could say get that, come in here, take whatever that float value is, and set our health to whatever that is. So if I hit I while we're running here, we should see now that if I hit the I key a couple of times, So I'm in here, I hit I, now I'm going to hit J. And J shows that we have 11. If I hit I again, now we have 14. I hit that a couple times, so there's 14. I hit it again, we've got 15. Hit it again, we've got 16, 17, so on and so forth. So what I could do is I could increment my health values and store those in that variable and then retrieve them whenever I want to. Now, things like health have a chance again to rise and fall, right? So what we want to do is we want to be able to store more values of health. Like health has a couple of other options on it. We have whatever our max health would be. We have whatever our current health is. We might have something that increases the total amount of health that we can have temporarily, like you might have a weapon that has some type of vampiric regeneration on it that allows your health to go above whatever its max would be. Whatever the case would be. So this would be kind of a very lackluster solution for trying to do this. What we would want to do instead is to create a structure that we can apply to this, and then we have other parameters within that structure that we can set up. Okay, so let's talk about how we would do that. If we go back out here into the system, and again, I'm just going to put these in this RPG content directory. I can right click and do a new blueprint class, and you have a couple of different things in here. One of these things is called a struct. So I would go in and say struct or structure, and it should pull up an object structure, right? But we don't see that in there. So let's go blueprint class, right click, and if we go up here, there should be under miscellaneous, maybe, is it in here? Structure, I forget where we keep this. Right here under blueprints, and then structure. And so these things that we're talking about here for our character, like health and strength or mana or any of those types of things, we're going to give those a common name. Let's call this S underscore for S for structure, and we're going to call these attributes. And under the attribute structure, now what we can do is we can define several different values that all hold data, and then we could put this variable type on there and store more things. So most of the things that we're going to have in here are going to be floats. And again, we want to have a couple of these, so we just make that a float. We can just hit add variable a couple times, and we're going to have a starting value or a base value. So we'll call this base value. And then, you might have a, excuse me, we talked about like maybe you have a buff or an augmentation or something that increases your thing. And so you want to put that into another spot where you can add and remove points in there. For now, we'll call these buffs or buff. Just stick the number in there. And we'll just, for the sake of argument here, we'll say that we can have positive and negative buffs. Right, debuffs and buffs will just be all under the buff type category. The other thing we might have over here is something where you can add a multiplier, like so you have a percentage, like 10%, 20%, 30%. So we'll call this multiplier. And then the last thing we would have would be whatever our max could be. Let's just say these are our things. And we can always come back and change the structure later, but we're just going to start with this for now. So if we save that S attribute structure, now what we could do is when we go back into our character, let's go back here, back to that default pawn class and open this up. What we can do now is under the health variable, instead of calling that a float, let's say that we want to apply that structure to that. So variable type over here, you can just change this to S underscore attribute. And what this will do now, because it already exists, it tells me I'm getting ready to change this, and it could break something. But I'm going to say go ahead and change that variable type, and it's going to go and index all those, or not index them, but update them. I'm going to say dismiss that. And now when we compile and save, we'll see that we get some errors here because now we have things that that they're not the same as they used to be. So if we want to fix this, what we can do is come off of the new pin. So we see how we have an old pin and a new pin. We just come off the new pin into there. And actually, in this one, we have to go up to the in string. I think we can go, actually just delete that in general. And pull, so it says S attribute structure is not accurate with that anymore. So let's just delete these. And so we pull health out and say get health. And I think it needs to know what that is. You know, what thing from health do you want? So what we would do is we have to right click on this, or we could actually come out here and just say break S attributes. And if we break that, now we have all of the different things that are inside of that structure that we could pick from. Okay, and so in our case here, our health, we want to get whatever the max value is. Let's just say that that's what we're looking at there. And then on this one, let's just say the same thing. We want to go over here and we want to set our health, but we have to break this again. Split struct pin. And this will say what thing we're setting. So we want to set our current to be +1. So we would go back and get our health. Bring this out, break it. Get whatever the max value is. And say to set that health max going in there, +1 like we did last time. And the output of that is going to go into our health max. And again, this is just, I'm just showing you the general idea behind having all these different variables and variable types and structs and things like that. Because this is where, down the road, this is going to get to be a little bit more complicated. I want to start out with a very simplistic kind of idea here. So again, we have our I and J values in here. So if I hit the I value, I just added something to it, and if I hit J, I'm going to display it. So I have 1 in here. I'll hit I a couple of times and hit J again. Now you can see it's 9, so on and so forth. So now what I have is a place that I can store more parameters or more values or more attributes or whatever with like sub categories within each thing. So that's an improvement, right? We have a spot to store more stuff now. But an even better way to do this, to make this a little bit more modular per se, is that we could actually take this whole thing and we could create another type of blueprint that we would stick these things on. So let's go back to our RPG content folder. We're going to right click out here and we're going to say that this blueprint class is actually going to be something called an actor component. And what we can do is AC for actor component underscore attributes. And in the actor component for attributes, now what you can do is in here you go and create a variable. And this is going to be an S underscore attributes from the struct. And this value can be called, you guessed it, health. And if we store that variable name health there under the S attribute structure, compile and save that, and we'll see over here now we have these default values we can put in, right? And so now we have a place to store multiple variables of different types that use that same type of structure. So I could say I want health. I could go and create another one that follows the same path here, and I'm going to say this might be my mana. I'll follow another one in here called strength, you know, so on and so forth. I could do intelligence, dexterity, you know, whatever values I want to store. And I might make another one, a separate one for non-weapon proficiencies, things like fishing, tailoring, skinning, you know, whatever those other skills are that you want to be able to check values against. And what we do in most of these situations is we use the numbers that are in here and we use some other character's numbers to compare these two things to give each other a chance to hit, you know, in combat, or a chance to inflict a certain amount of damage, or a percentage chance to succeed at some type of skill that we want to try. So now every one of these things, like dexterity now has a base value, a buff, a multiplier, and a max. Intelligence would have same thing, a base value, a buff, a multiplier, and a max. And then what we do is we take this attributes actor component. And what we can do is we go over to our character here. I'm just going to go ahead and delete. Well, actually, it's going to break a couple things here when I do that, but let's just delete that. And I really do want to delete it. And we're going to go add another variable. Actually, instead of a variable here, now what we can do is we can come up and add a component to our character. So this will, error out. Let's go ahead and just get rid of these values real quick. We don't want them in there. And it should be enough to do it there. And we'll just say add a component, and this is going to be AC underscore attributes. And it's actually, I think this is case sensitive. So there's our attributes there, and we can just add this in and save and compile that. We'll slide down a little bit. And now in our attributes over here on the side, we should have a section when we go to our class over here. Actually, for that component, when we just highlight on that, now we have health, mana, strength, intelligence, dexterity, so on and so forth. And now we could pull out this and say, like we did earlier, we can come down here. You should be able to get values from this as well. And we have this, so now we can get our values that are in these things over here. So I can come over here and say get health. And now that I have health here, I can come off of this and I can split this again. I can break those attributes out, and I can get a certain aspect of that health from the attributes actor component. So I could go over here and do the same thing we did before. We just plug our base value in over there. So if we do that, that'll tell us our base value. And I can do the same thing over here. I'm just going to copy this. And we can say that anytime we want to increment this, I can come out and say, plus plus like we did before. We'll do an incremental float, and we'll take our base value plus 1. And then we're going to do the same thing over here and do a setter on this. So over here, this got that. But if I take the AC attributes out here again, I can just pull off of this and say set my health. And I'm setting health here like so. And I'm going to set health to be, you got to break this, split this out, and say, whoops, move that out of the way. And we're going to say set the health to be equal to that base value plus 1, and come over here and say set that as our new health max. So you do like this kind of thing if you're leveling up the character or whatever. Now I'm just driving this with keyboard shortcuts and things like that for now, but just to again convey the general idea here. So if I come back over and I hit F11 again, I'm going to hit the J key. We'll see that I have 0 over there. And I'm going to hit the I key one time, and now I should have... Oh, let's see. That didn't work. Let's go see what I did. Stop that. What did I miss? Okay, what I missed over here is I grabbed the wrong stuff. So actually, this should have been max driven into that pin, and this should be max driven into that pin because I'm trying to update the health max, right? So I wanted to get the health max up here and display it, and over here I'm getting the health max, adding 1 to it, and then setting that as the new health max. So I just had the wrong values plugged in. So if I compile this again, hit save, come back out and play, and hit F11 on that. Again, I hit the I key one time. Now you can see I have a 1. I hit it a couple more times, and now I have a 3. I hit it a bunch more times, and now I have a 14, and so on and so forth. So, excuse me, that's a simple introduction, hopefully, to the idea of using structures and variables to contain some of the things that we want to do in these attributes or in these other skills, non-weapon proficiencies, and things like that. The other thing that we'll talk about in here is, instead of using, I'm not going to talk about it in this video, but the other thing we'll talk about in the process of this quote unquote course is other ways to set these values, and we will also explore the idea of using gameplay tags that we can call gameplay tag handlers to add or decrease values and set buffs and all that kind of stuff. Gameplay tags are nice because they give you a really elegant way to add something to a character that can be compared, and then you can use that to drive other gameplay behavior. Like a simple example would be if you want to poison something, you could just set a tag on there to say that your character has an effect dot poison. And then you can say, if this character has poison, here's what I want to do. And you can set the poison, have a temporary, period of time that's on there, or it could be on there. You could be cursed. You could be cursed until you take something that removes the curse. So we'll get into all that kind of stuff a little bit in one of the next videos or upcoming videos. But I want to stop here, give you guys a chance to kind of digest that. I know I'm rambling on a little bit. It's kind of tired. We had a really long night. But no excuse. Hopefully you guys get a chance to check this out and it makes sense. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and we'll get back to this as soon as we can. Thanks again for watching, guys.